Hi, my name is Michael Staton. I'm a partner at Learn Capital. We are an early stage venture capital firm supporting companies that are transforming the way the world learns globally. I'm happy to be speaking with you at the Global Mindset Conference, Rethinking Assessment and Learning. To give you a little more context on Learn Capital, over the past 5 years, we've invested in nearly 50 education technology companies, which makes us one of, if not the most active investor into early stage education and learning technology on the planet. Combined, these companies are now reaching over 100 million learners around the planet, and they affect learners of, frankly, every age group, every level of school participation, every type of consumer or demographic that we've certainly found to have conceivable innovation or business models. And we reflect on this experience and can help share insights with communities such as yourselves and participate in conversations about policy, institutional change, social change, and any of these types of conversations. So I welcome your questions and your continued engagement. At Learn Capital, we're bullish on the market opportunity for assessment and the ability for assessment to drive meaningful and transformational outcomes for learners and for educators and administrators. As somebody who started in the classroom, I started as a high school teacher, I understand that it's a loaded proposition to talk about assessment as a driver of curriculum and pedagogy. That being said, when you look at the macro environment, you realize that assessment isn't going away, it's just increasing. So the ability for educators to adapt is extremely important. What I mean by this is that governments are increasingly relying on assessment to benchmark efficacy and manage their education systems. So this includes national assessments. It also includes international assessments. So PISA is actually starting to drive a lot of curriculum choices by the OECD nations and by nations that want to compete in post-industrial knowledge economies. We also see that university systems are relying more on assessment, particularly in developing and emerging markets where the supply is very constrained and more people want access. So the test regime right now seems to be the only way to filter students appropriately or inappropriately. We also see that assessment is starting to become more of a corporate tool for companies and industries to identify talent, to source talent, to be able to grow talent, and we're starting to see assessment work its way into those ecosystems. And so our kind of thesis, more or less, is that assessment is going to be everywhere it can possibly be. They're going to explode in types and varieties and time frames and media forms and the way that they interact with content and pedagogy. And we're really looking for companies that are ambitiously growing the form and kind of outlet of assessment and making it possible for assessment to kind of explode, kind of be everywhere. It's probably worth defining assessment, since I'm going to have a few comments about the future of assessment. We really see assessment as the capture of learner knowledge, ability, or performance. And this can be of any type in any way. Now on to the way that assessment is changing using technology, the internet, and mobile devices. The first thing that is happening is that formative assessment is now possible, but is not used to the extent of its capability. So already there are many companies that are making assessment possible in the middle of the pedagogy and in the middle of curriculum. So our portfolio company Mastery Connect, which acquired Socrative. There's a group out of Norway and London called Kahoot. There's a group out of Canada called Top Hat Monocle. These are all introducing the ability to take snapshots, do benchmarks, and have formative assessment really be part of the curriculum, be part of the way that students engage in classrooms. At this point in time, people aren't using it to the fullest extent, but we think that that's kind of radically going to shift as these things become more mass market. Assessment is already almost and is certainly going to be bring your own device. Up until recently, the biggest constraint on assessment was actually printing it and putting it in front of students, having them fill it out, and then being able to grade it in some way. And increasingly, assessments are going to be driven by mobile devices, and students are going to be able to interact with them through their own mobile devices. Assessment is not going to be limited to multiple choice exams. I think multiple choice exams actually have been a format limitation, limited by paper, basically, and more importantly, limited by the time it took to grade the assessments or the actual student work. And so one thing that we're seeing is new ways to crowdsource or outsource the grading, which is a sticky issue, and I won't deny that it's a sticky issue, but the reason that I'm bullish on it is that we need to have our learners doing more rigorous work, having more complex assignments, having more complex and real-world deliverables, and the only way to do that is to decouple the actual activities and assignments and work products from instructor bandwidth. And I think that once this is done through companies like Crowdmark and others, we're going to see an explosion in having high expectations for students, not just once a semester, not just twice a semester, but all the time. And I'm looking forward to that. Practice and assessment will merge. Already we're seeing it in math and grammar here in the United States. So our portfolio company Desmos is it's essentially an interactive graphing calculator that can be used in kind of Algebra Plus, and is an interactive math journal. And practicing math is actually kind of part of the assessment now. It generates data that teachers can use. Same thing with No Red Ink, which is grammar practice. Both of these companies are seeing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of problems tackled per day, and are creating meaningful data for instructors. This is an area where we think different services are going to be in narrow curriculum kind of blocks. It's very difficult to have practice and assessment be linked across curriculum. We think it's going to be within particular subject areas or domains. There's also been a movement towards what I think the industry is calling authentic assessments, which is that the way that you capture student knowledge, ability, and performance is actually in the act itself, in the thing that the learner is motivated to do. So one of our companies, DIY, issues badges for the completion and validation of certain projects. You complete a project and then you submit an artifact to the wider community, which you're very eager to do because you're participating in a community. And then the community has a guild structure, and then the masters can choose whether or not they're going to issue you a badge. It's pretty creative. But we think that this concept of having authentic communities that are able to assess work in an authentic way is really going to be much more a part of the learning experience. We also see that these new forms of web and mobile assessment are starting to creep into the corporate environment around the world, actually. So here are some companies that we've run into recently, one of which is in our portfolio. So one is called NAC. It helps in the hiring process and then in the training process identify particular talents or knacks within candidates or new hires. This allows management to kind of either select a candidate or find among their new hires people that would be particularly responsive to training in particular areas. There's another company called Score. They run studentcompetitions.com, and they use assessments to as a kind of campaign, which is like a corporate challenge. And they open this up to a broad base of people. They have tens of thousands of participants, and they're able to surface the top 20 performers for an opportunity to intern at a company or to work for a company. And then Caliber is a company within our own portfolio that uses assessment during the hiring process for the business processes outsourcing market in the Philippines and in India. And this is an area that has a lot of churn, and they're hiring people in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. They also have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of applicants. And so as a result, just the scale of the hiring procedures becomes a data problem. And they're able to use assessment as part of a data generation process with hiring companies to surface the best talent. They also run learning cafes in Manila, where if you're not quite ready for a job, but you're close, you can go and study there until you get the job, and that's a free service offered by Caliber. Thanks for being a part of this conversation with Global Mindset. I hope to further engage with you. Feel free to interact with us on Twitter. And look forward to participating in more of the dialogue here at this conference.